feel like everybody's right and everybody's wrong.
100%. Why is this important? Why are we even going here? He's helped a lot of guys. He's also not had success with a lot of guys.
Come in with a purpose, and they're very intentional with what they do and how they do it.
From the majors to the sandlot, baseball and softball share space in one place. Welcome to the farm system.
Fellas, and the ladies, welcome back to another episode of The Farm. We are back. Oh my God, did you hear her?
Well,
You
back
always
at it
count on
again.
Nicole to make
Back
some
at it
noises
again.
back there in the pod. There she is, on the run.
Never fail.
Never fails. Code, you said you had a subject that was on your heart, so why don't you go ahead and open that up?
Yeah, one of the subjects that's kind of been on my heart recently is just transferring or moving, or in general just finding like a good fit for you when it comes to a program in college. And so like that whole process from beginning to the end, I know I went to a junior college and then transferred. And so,
Shout out to JC.
you know, obviously I was forced to, I lost my eligibility at the junior college level after playing both years, but I know you also went to a junior college, transferred, and then you also transferred after, from the first 4 year you chose to go to another 4 year. And so, and then
Also not really by choice.
not by choice, but you did do it, and you had that experience. And then also too, I had a coaching change at my 4 year that was, I mean, I was in the same location, but it was a very different program, and so it was essentially like, you know, moving in the sense of the culture and how it was ran. And so yeah, no, it's just been something that's been on my heart. You hear all of the transfer portal stuff. And then we got a lot of kids in here that are trying to find a good fit. And then, you know, kids that we've sent to junior college that are obviously trying to find, you know, their next home, or have found their next home. And so just that topic's been on my heart recently of what that process looks like for everybody. And then too, I wanted to kind of pick your brain. Like, how did you choose? Obviously one of them wasn't by choice, like you said, but and then also too, how'd you handle it when you got there, even though that wasn't really part of your vision and your plan, but it's part of God's plan and in your life and everything. So I wanted to pick your brain on some of that. So yeah,
let me get Tank's over there trying to find any way he can to get this nap in.
He was like, I transferred with you everywhere we went.
I'm trying to. That was long before Tanky was a thought. But yeah, no. Immediately, I think one of the big things that I love to point out, and then, like I said, shout out to junior colleges here, is you hear me all the time. I recommend junior college to a lot of athletes. One, a lot of times it's not even on their brain, and that's silly. First off, second off, too, a lot of them too, it's going to be your greatest advantage. Not only do people think, it's junior colleges. It's like they're not, they have this idea that they think it's not as good, or like they want to go straight to a Power 5 or these things. And I'm like telling a lot of these players, like, hey, go watch a game of a Power 5 team playing and count how many freshmen and sophomores are playing. And then if they are playing, they're usually like draft picks, like really high level, like, for example, like Dylan Cruz or something like that, right? Like, okay, he got drafted at a high school in the first round.
Right.
And chose to go to college anyways. Like, that's not traditional. Like, a lot of guys would have just been like, no, I'm going. I got in the first round, like, I'm going straight. He didn't do that. He went and played 4 years of college, right? So that's a very unique situation. So to look at him and go, yeah, that's going to be me, it's like, probably not, right? So the other thing is when you go into junior colleges, it can be really great as well, because you have the opportunity where you're only competing against, again, other kids that are in that same range of age groups, right? It's not you against the senior, right? And you can also, there's also less regulations when it comes into practice times and all those other things as well. Again, you played junior college, so I think we were a couple times some kings of like, we're pushing 6 hour practice. Like, I mean, they were getting long, right? They were getting long. It's like basically we got out of class and then we would have, you could say, well, it wasn't really practice because they were doing extras. Okay, extras when my coach knows my schedule and knows that I could be there, but I'm not, is not really extras, right? That's practice. I'm going to practice. So I go to practice right out of school, and then we would practice until the sun goes down. Well, at certain times of the year, that's like 7, 8 o'clock, right? And that's a long practice, right? Especially the beginning parts of the year, right? So that's, a big part of it is there's less regulations when it comes into that. And you can really develop, right? And so the reason I say all that is that also, before we can talk about the transfer, you got to talk about like, hey, like transferring isn't a bad thing, and also you can set it up in the first place. And then I think there's two parts of that we got to unpack. We have the actual X's and O's of how do I transfer, how does it work, the education around that side, but then you also have the mindset, and then you have all of that comes into of like going into a new team. Why should I be transferring? Why should I be open to that? And again, maybe it's not from a junior college, like you said. Maybe it's a 4-year to a 4-year.
Right.
Maybe it's a JUCO to a JUCO. Maybe maybe it's a high school to a high school now, right? Like there's all of those things, but a lot of it is overlapping. I think between the fact. The first thing I think of X's and O's is if you're in high school and you're listening right now, or you're at a junior college right now, and you're in, and again, I didn't realize this till halfway through my freshman year, and I'm sure you might have went through a similar process, is making sure that you're picking a degree, right, that allows you to transfer, right from the get-go, right? I didn't. I picked criminal justice, and I later found out to graduate, which is what I needed, because this is another thing. Your rules also change. For me, I actually was in JUCO for 3 years because I broke my hand 1 year and had to have surgery, and I stayed there for an extra year. And I didn't even play a game. But there's some people that have a injury red shirt or whatever, right? And they end up staying there. But the thing is now if you're a 3-year transfer, there's different requirements than if you're a 2-year transfer. So know that. If you're a 3-year transfer at a JUCO and you redshirted 1 year and your clock already started with NCAA, then that's a different transfer rules than you have. And if I believe that you have to have, as a 3-year, you have to have your associates, right, and 60% of your bachelor completed. And now the reason that that's hard on the percentage is it matters the school that you're transferring to. Do they take your degree? Do they accept your classes of where you're going? And like, again, for example, like I was in California, so there's some other classes I had to take in the summer so that I could even, from an academic standpoint, could I even be accepted? And also be eligible to play, which is what happened to my second transfer. I already messed all this up. So I messed up so they don't have to do this, right? Is that the percentages was tough. I actually ended up being like 1 credit shy. Was it my fault? Was it my recruiting coordinator's fault? A little both. But in any case, right, that you just know that. And as a 2-year, I believe it's 40% of your bachelor's and your associates to transfer to a Division I. Now.
Right, which too, a bachelor's should put you in position to have, or an associate should put you in position to have 40%.
As long as your associates is working towards that
whatever
area.
that master.
Right, yeah, exactly, right? So like if, for example, when I'm doing criminal justice and then I switch over to coaching, there is some base level classes that and again, and that's where the percentage comes really tight, right? Where let's say there's 4 classes that I started working towards my degree. Well, those classes won't transfer, but it might, do something. So I ended up switching my degree to like liberal arts with an emphasis in communication. Right. So I switched mine over because another thing was my problem. The reason I couldn't get my associates as for criminal justice, because one of the requirements was I had to go do an internship with the police department for 3 months from 9 to 5. That's not working with college and going and playing, and playing baseball, and also going to a junior college had a limited class schedule. They weren't doing classes, all these classes at night, and again, they started to offer a little bit more as the college got a little bigger. So that was just one thing, like to keep that all in mind, is that when you're picking and just because you want to transfer doesn't mean you can, and be very careful because you can transfer and not be able to play, which is what happened to me. Right. So it's a very important thing that you did that. And also too, it's really hard for me. And it was a really challenging thing for me. And this is you get into the mindset stuff is I did transfer, got my dream of playing Division I baseball, but then couldn't play Division I. Not because I wasn't good enough, but I did all that work. And this was like built to some of those things we talked about on the podcast before, where built a lot of resentment in me, where it's like I trained so hard, and because of an academic NCAA rule, and because of some things that fell, like I was literally like 58% instead of 60%. I was like, a couple percentage points with like 1 credit I was missing. And you can't have it when you're already in the year. You're like, oh, well, you're a spring sport. I could take it in the fall. No. You have to have it before coming in for your fall, which is a crazy requirement, right? Because they just want all sports to be the same. Just because you're a spring sport, they don't care. You have to have it before the year starts, right? So anyways, that was the thing at the time. So I just want to emphasize there that X's and O's matter. You can't just transfer where you want because you're so good and I'm going to go these other places and I'm going to do all those things. Now, Division II, I believe you don't even need your associates. You play Division II, so you might know a little bit better than I do on that side.
To my understanding, you need your associates.
Okay.
to qualify for academic money.
Oh,
So I don't think you need it,
interesting.
but to get academic money, which
Okay.
obviously
Do we need,
D2s
do we,
are
do we
less
need to put an
funded.
asterisk right here and go,
Yeah.
we are not a representative
not
of the
for sure.
NCAA.
Not for sure.
Please do
The-
not hold
well,
us to the,
yeah,
just
and-
start thinking this
and it-
direction.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I can go that direction because my roommate, we went to the same JUCO, but went to the same 4-year as well.
Mm.
He didn't get his associates because he switched after his freshman year, realizing the same thing. He was going into some agricultural, and there was like a trade school attached to my JC, so he could get that trade essentially, right? But then he decided he wanted to go play after junior college, and then that degree was basically, it was a 3-year degree. It wasn't leading to a bachelor's.
Got it.
And then to the school that we transferred to didn't have anything in agricultural, studies anyways.
Got it.
And so when he transferred, he didn't have his associates.
Yep.
And so all of his money, he still transferred and
Yep.
was accepted,
Yep.
but he didn't get academic money.
Got it.
Whereas I was mostly academic money because I had my associates.
Got it.
Um,
And that may even,
So-
just because you said specifically academic, that could also be school specific. Like
Right.
I don't know if it's an NCAA rule or if that's a school specific thing where it's like,
Yeah.
hey, you got to have this, and this is how we
Mhm.
qualify you for this academic availability or whatever.
Yeah, right. And that was one of the points I was going to make too, that I didn't understand when I first went to JC was, I mean, I grew up in Kansas City, you know that. And so we had all sorts of JUCOs in Missouri and Kansas, the Jayhawk Conference, like all that stuff that I could have gone to. Ended up going out to Colorado, and I was
Cardinals fan though.
like,
Listen, I don't listen.
you know,
we
that's
went
for another
Kansas
podcast.
City.
That's for another-
Yeah, no,
Hey,
another
hey,
thing.
I supported the Royals when they won it,
I
but,
guess.
but I was a pool holes fan.
Yeah, I get you.
But I didn't realize when I went out to my JC in Colorado, and then I was looking at schools back in Missouri and Kansas and Nebraska and like some stuff back closer to where my family was. I didn't realize that my credits wouldn't transfer the same.
Yeah.
To the universities
Yeah,
back in
you're like
those states.
you're like I already did it with this other.
Yeah,
thing.
and they were
I
like, well,
already know
we don't
Yeah.
accept that.
Exactly.
Right.
Very
and,
important.
And it was very, very different. And then I had taken a college course in high school, my senior year, that was they didn't accept it at my JC, so I had to retake chemistry at my
Yep.
JC.
Yep, I had
I
to do
took
that
like
too.
a pre-test,
Yeah.
and I got like a 92% on my pre-test first
Yes.
week of the year, and they're like,
Yeah.
well, how'd that happen? I was like,
Yeah.
I already took this class.
Some to that though, there's some schools and classes you can test out of the
Mhm,
classes.
which I did.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
Right.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. So that's another thing too. Just because the course doesn't transfer, you may be able to take a test
Mhm,
to quantify you to skip that class.
Right.
So, and again, usually it's like lower level classes
Yeah,
like
gen eds
maths,
and stuff,
yeah, gen ed stuff. Yeah. So just to put that out there as well, like there is these other things. And this is why the X's and O's do matter. And like, this is why a recruiting coordinator is so big for that other school and why they have a designated recruiting coordinator, because their job is to go and pull in your transcripts,
Mhm.
right? Make sure how that's going to go with the school, tell you what you need to do. I had to take like 3 classes during summer so that I could,
Mhm.
supposedly so that I could be eligible.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, that part, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's super important because as I look back, that would have influenced my decision where I went to junior college now, because
Yeah.
I knew that I wanted to hopefully go back closer to my family.
Yeah.
Just really important decision for me was to be back close to my family. Well, all the schools that I had the opportunity to possibly go play for, I had much less of my school covered because I didn't get my academic money.
Really important.
Yeah, which is also really
So-
important because you get limited
well-
scholarships in baseball in the
Well,
first
like
league.
you said, it also comes in. X's and O's matter, right?
Mm.
Okay, great. Academically, I got in.
Mm.
Okay, I have my scholarship. I'm ready to play baseball. Oh wait, I don't have money.
Mm-hmm.
Big deal,
Yeah,
right? Like
very big.
X's and O's matter, right?
Mhm.
Like before we can even get to the field, can you even be eligible?
Mm.
Okay, that's one, right? I got into the school. Are you good enough? 2, okay, great. Now what if you just can't afford it,
Right.
right? And you're not in a situation where you can only apply for this many grants or whatever it is, and you can't only get this in loans. Like, I can't even afford to be here.
Yeah.
Live, food, all the other things that go into
Yeah,
all that,
and
right?
and then too is I'm sure you experienced like some of the stuff that happened to me when I was in college, and I know some of my roommates and friends and stuff throughout college. Like your performance can be influenced by what happens, not even in the baseball world. Like, I'm failing classes because I just switched degrees into something, and like I went to a degree
Mhm.
that I didn't even want to do, because I thought this was going to be bad. Like, there's so many different factors, and then you move
Yeah.
away from home, and
Yeah.
you're taking out loans yourself because
Yeah.
you didn't get scholarship,
Yeah.
and it's like, well, next thing you know, it like,
Yeah.
well, are you even
Well,
maximizing your potential
Well, let's
at
say
that
you
location?
can even say right there, I'm taking out loans, and then you're like, okay, first off, you're probably 17, 18, 19 years old,
Yeah.
right? When you first get into college, right? You're like, oh yeah, just pay it later. Just give me
Yeah.
the money now.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, okay, I'm gonna tell you, we're on the other side
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
student loans, right? Even this, how it's set up and how they structure their interest and all those other things. Like, there's a reason why there's such a big issue right now
Yeah.
with those things. So yeah, make sure keeping all that in mind. And also, everybody has this idea that like, oh, everything's just gonna be covered. And I'm gonna be,
Yeah.
everything like that rarely happens.
Right.
Like it's again. We have what I think it's 11.2 or 11.7.
Yeah.
Like 11.2 or 11.7, right? Scholarships for the entire team of 40 something guys. NILs, again, if you're at a Power 5, sure.
helps.
Other schools, like not as much, right? They're very, unlikely. Those schools are probably operating the exact same as they used to operate.
Mm-hmm.
And so keeping those things in mind, right, too, as well as like also don't sacrifice your entire future and put yourself in such a deep hole, because you might, again, on the same side of that, you're going to have some resentment on the other side of, okay, you do all that, you could do all of that and still not play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And you need to understand that, like, what the risk that you're taking before you're just like, well, I'm going pro, so it doesn't matter. It's like, all right, bro, but chill out. You're at a mid-major D2, right?
Yeah.
And just understand, right, that there's probably a really low likelihood that you're going to be able to have one paycheck cover, your 50 grand that you're in debt now because you chose and made these decisions. Like you need to be smart about setting yourself up for, your degree and, your finances and all those other things. Cause like you can't play baseball for the rest of your life. Like,
Right.
you got to understand that.
Yeah. And that's where too, I just didn't ask enough questions when I was in that process, which again,
There's
most
a lot to learn.
18-year-olds probably don't ask enough questions. They need people to advise them. And I was lucky about halfway through my freshman year that I had a really good advisor that was like, well, what do you even want to do? And I was like, well, I could do this. I could do that. I could do this. And, I gave up, 5 things that I was like, I could possibly want to go into nursing or PT or, this or that. And he was like, well, how about we just say super general with your associates and just science? Like, because at my JC, you could go into like computer science. You can go into more of like a nursing focused associates, but that would also hurt me in some of my credits to go into a different bachelor's degree at where I ended up going. And so I was super thankful that I had a good advisor at my JC that helped me kind of put me in position where when I did transfer to my 4-year, I had a lot of choices and they all transferred and I could have gone to like 3 different majors essentially. But again, it took me asking a lot of questions. I had a different advisor, asked a few questions, was like, I really like, it just doesn't make sense to me, blah, blah, blah. Ended up on like my 3rd advisor. And then he was like, hey, here's what I worked with athletes, most of our athletes,
that's
blah, blah.
what I was going to say.
And, specifically it helped athletes that were, hey, we've sent athletes to places out of state and we send them to in-state. And like, here's what I see typically with out of state. Here's what I see in-state.
And to that exact point that I was going to say is the advisor, the reason that you would, like you just recommended, why you should go and sit with someone that is an academic advisor and understands NCAA is those are different requirements than just graduating.
Right.
Most academic advisors are only worried about you graduating from their school.
Yeah.
Right. Where that's part of it. But if you tell them, like I sit down with my advisor and say, hey, I want to go to Vanderbilt. I want to go to whatever. And this is who I'm even is looking at me right now. These are possible options. Well, now that advisor is going to look and say, well, we know that these courses, like for example, maybe an elective or I used to have like our school, and you got to be careful with these type of classes. It's like a hospitality that area always is very iffy because a lot of schools won't accept a certain class that another school will.
Yeah.
So like one of my hospitality classes was, and I think me and Taylor talked about this before, was like we watched movies, right? And then it was from certain decades and we had to write reports and like what it represented within the culture and all those other things. Well, that didn't transfer to a lot of schools.
Yeah.
They didn't accept that class. If you were in that area, they did like a Chico, stuff like that. Like, cool. In that area, they accepted it. But, when I went to go to other schools, like that was issues that I was having of getting certain things to transfer, right? So even though that you would look at that as like a gen ed and like, oh, that's pretty standard across the board. Well, it's like, well, it's not really very standard ed, like across the board. And there actually is some issues with some of those gen ed classes that may not, transfer that you need to do. And also, if you can point out the exact school that you want to go to and someone that's actually worked with athletes, they'll know a lot more about those percentages and like those other things and saying like, hey, like let's say you sit down and you go, for example, you sit down and go, I want to do criminal justice your first day as a freshman. And they go, hey, well, what are your goals? Oh, well, I want to go play at a 4-year, I'm chasing after a Division I, all these things. Okay, great. Well, let me advise you this. If you take criminal justice, you won't have your 2-year degree when you walk out of here because on the time frame that you want to get it from because of your schedule, because of how this is going to work. So I would advise that you don't take that. It doesn't mean that you could never do it, right? But right now, for you to do your goals, I think you should take on like liberal arts, all these other things are things that you could get done, so that you could go and do what you need to go do. Just because I know the requirements here at this college to graduate with that, you have to do this, and that's not going to work. So like your point there, I just want to emphasize that is like, if you can find an advisor that specifically, and a lot of times you can ask the coaches, right? Like they usually have one advisor or two, depending on size of the school, whatever, that is specifically has worked with a lot of athletes and like understands that process of like coordinating all that.
Yeah. And then too, just with that, like my junior college was in a small town, which I know a lot of them are in smaller towns, right?
Yeah.
And they get a lot of kids that are from that area that are just trying to graduate, like you said, their school. And then go do something locally where they're from, which is also like, it's cool. That's just what they're used to working with.
Yeah. Fire Academy was big for us.
Yeah.
Like
fire,
they all wanted to do fire.
criminal, agriculture, like those three were really big. They were like, 2 years plus an internship and they were done. They could go get a job, blah, 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 blah.
I probably should have done that. I would have made a lot more money, Cody. You know what I'm saying?
Well, here we are.
Here
we are. So, but yeah, it's like, so that's really important is like finding someone that, one, setting out that and like laying goals and like a direction for yourself, even if it doesn't go that direction, at least gets that ball rolling in the correct, general direction for you. And then to something else, like go more baseball related and on the field mindset wise that I think is interesting is, like you mentioned, the long practices at the junior college level is, I felt, me personally, I liked the experience of, I don't know when practice is going to end because I felt like it weeded out the people that didn't want to be there.
For sure.
Which at my point in my life, it was really frustrating, and it would really drive me crazy. Like, why are you guys here? Like, why are you guys here if you don't want to be on the baseball field? Like, that was just my mindset, and so
opens a lot of time for conditioning.
Unfortunately,
we did quite a bit of conditioning in those first couple of weeks for some reason. I wonder, how many people got weeded out.
Hey, we had I think it was like 96 kids show up to the first week.
That happens a lot too.
Yeah, 2 weeks later we had like 50.
Isn't the roster a lot more free too compared to NCAA? I think they can hold more, right?
Yeah, I think
especially for fall, obviously.
Yeah, I think you can have more. You can only travel so many. Yeah, but you can hold more. Like I believe we had like 60 kids, but we can only travel 40.
That's a crazy thing about junior college,
which is insane.
Yeah, and then you'd also think that's why kids also get so good. It's like you got a lot of competition.
Yeah.
But also why the practices are so long because you have so many people to get through. But you can get a lot. Like for example, batting practice is, instead of it being so tight and close to that, we can make it longer, right? So there's a lot of development. You can have weights in the morning and it doesn't count against practice time. You can do a lot of those things. So it's a big time to actually get some extra development.
Right.
And for me, and I'm sure it's for you too, is because batting practice was so long, I got a lot of live reps.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm out there, again, I'm feeling a lot of ground balls from the live reps because our batting practice is longer, along with it. And, my junior college coach, though, I got a lot of reps from second, though, because we were hitting so many balls the opposite way. It was like ground ball opposite way, ground ball opposite way, right? Move them over, move other things. So I still like, we did so much of that, stuff. I had to go to the other side of the infield so I can get all my stuff, but still.
Yeah, no, a lot of reps defensively during batting practice, too. And then also another thing that I think is interesting that I thought about recently that never really came up in my mind was the thought process. So going into my sophomore year, there was only 2 of us that played on the team the year before. There were kids that were there. Only 2 kids that played on our roster the year before my sophomore year at JUCO. And so like the turnover, the recycle, like, hey, this is a completely new team. Like same uniform, same coach. Like there's a couple guys lingering around here that but also like new squad comes in. And so I was gonna kind of pick your brain on that. Like, what's your opinion when you were at JUCO? Like, did you have the turnover like the same way, or did you guys did you have a lot of guys that started with you your first year that obviously I know you said you got hurt, that stuck with you, or what that kind of look like, and how'd that affect you when you played?
Yeah, definitely a lot of roster fluctuation, but also a lot of guys that stayed. You know, you're gonna have a group of both of all the things. Yeah, and also too, right? It's very different from a 4-year if you go in there for all years of your college, right? If it ends up being 4 or 6, right? I think the difference as well is you're already gonna have a lot of turnover because you're only at 2 years, right? So like the other guys are gone, right? Every 2 years that cycle's like boom, they're gone, they're gone, right? So like my 3rd year, majority of my guys were like gone, right? Was they all graduated and I was there for 1 more year, right? So I think that's like a big part of it too, and I think it can kind of make it like a yearly basis because there is so much fluctuation. But again, now 4 years are like that a lot too, just because of NILs. But I'm sorry about transfer portal. But at the same time, I think the mindset for me there was like you almost had an opportunity to be really good the year after a year that you were just terrible.
Awful, yeah.
Right? Like the year before you could have been awful. The next year you could be really good. And the next year you could suck again. Right? And so just because the roster fluctuates so much, there's it's a unique time as a coach. It's a unique time as a player. The teams are very different and like how you're going to play. Maybe this year you're very like move them over, score runs, all this stuff. And the next year, like you guys bang a little bit, know? So like having that like together, is a different mindset too of just like you have to be more dynamic as a player for sure.
Yeah, and the reason I bring that up is because 4 years are turning into like it's free agency
more like
at
that
times,
sure.
with the transfer portal and like I mean obviously everyone saw the LSU thing like hey, there's no better place to transfer to, and so they're gonna have people come into LSU, right, that weren't there last year, and so and I know there's so many programs out there that are so heavily like. This is our culture. We're building a culture. I want, these are the guys that have been here for 2-3 years. They know the culture, right? And building that up. And I do see value in that. Like you see that with organizations right now, like at the professional level. Like I'll use the NBA's. Like the Nuggets have had the same roster for 2-3 years, but they've just played with each other for 2-3 years now. They know each other so well.
They know where the person's going to be before he's there.
Like again, like I'm sure you played middle infield. Like the guys that you played middle infield with, I could go play middle infield tomorrow. I've been out for 2 years with the guy that I played short or second with, and I know where his misses are going to be most likely because you built that up with them. But like at JUCO, I played second, I played some short,
and they moved players around a lot too.
Yeah, and I'm playing with different shortstops. Like I had like 3 different shortstops my first year.
Yeah,
and then the next year we were pretty consistent. But then I get to my 4-year, which also another conversation is like the 4-year I went to was pretty much all JUCO guys. So every year was like also recycling. Very few freshmen that were there for a long time. But again, it's like so much fluctuation everywhere. It's like which did push me to take extra reps to gain that chemistry with those people and spend that time. But I also thought it was hard as a mindset. I almost felt selfish at times because I needed to be because nothing was the same. And so I had to really focus on myself. Which was kind of a hard thing for me to do.
I know, I'm about to say. For you, probably.
Me personally, it was like I felt like I was doing a lot of things for myself. From the academic side to
my self-possession was like, this is
right
about me,
But I just think that's a unique situation for a lot of people where, I learned how to work on myself. But I also think, as you know too, is like very few winning teams I was on weren't, didn't at least know each other. I wouldn't necessarily say we all loved each other, but there was a connection. We were all relatively knew each other and our strengths and our weaknesses. Like, oh, this guy's gonna go break a bat because he just struck out, or like we knew that stuff, like
for sure,
and it was pretty close, and so there was like a camaraderie there at least. And so it's just a different mindset playing in, when people are moving all around and like, how do you focus on you but still do what's best for the team at the same time?
I think a great point with that is like. One of the ways I looked at it too is like, well, by me taking care of me, I'm taking care of the team. Like I'm trying to be the best third baseman or whatever I could be, right? And like it's like the Nick Saban thing of like, do your job, right? Like, well, my job is not to pick who the shortstop is. Like my job is to be the best second baseman, and whoever coach decides to be at short is at short, and it could be me or it could be somebody else, right? Or whatever. But I was so focused on just trying to be the best player that I could be. And also too, by practicing with all these other guys, I kind of think of it now. Like the chemistry is good and those things as well, but also too, it could also make you a softer player overall or less dynamic because you don't know how to adjust based on, for example, I might, yes, on a routine ball, I do this, but how about when it's, kind of a little crazy and like he gets the bag a little late or whatever, right? And like, how do we adjust from there, right? Well, rather than, I kind of think of it now, like, for example, like sparring and when I do Muay Thai, like when they have their sparring days, right? So like on Saturdays, I go there and they spar, and I get like 20 different looks at like all of these different styles and all of these different guys and angles and things that I have to change. But it makes me a more dynamic fighter, right? So I think on the same side of that, there's in the short term, it could be detrimental, right? Because it's going to expose some things. But in the long term of development, I think it develops you more as an athlete to be able to, be more dynamic and not just be able to like, oh, well, like, for example, let's say like when I play short, like I had a really good arm. So second basemen could be a little slower and then I could gun it across the diamond and save us, right?
Yeah.
But if I don't have that, it's like I need a quick feed. Like I had shortstops that didn't have a good arm, and so I would pump it to them so that they could, throw a lesser like ball across the diamond, a little slower. And it's like, we had that interaction and difference, right? Or for example, like when I played, I would be slower with my feet because again, I was more about throwing a ball hard, right? So I would do an extra step, right? And some guys like they have to learn my timing, right? Along with that, right? It's like I didn't want to do that, right? So then again, and then being more dynamic, it's like, well, do I need to get it over quicker? Like, do I need to do those other things? And that's where, like that becomes like part of it. So I think it made me more of a dynamic player because I had so many different shortstops and like learned how to be a better second baseman and like know how to do both. Like, okay, maybe he's also got a really good arm, right? And he's gonna take his time getting to the bag, and he's not so aggressive, like dead sprinting out the bag when he comes through, and he wants to just catch it within flow. Okay, cool. So I can react to kind of all of those, and I think it made me a better like player by doing that. But like you said, in the short term, if I'm like trying to win like right now, or we're trying to have the best chemistry, like that's not the best thing. But again, on the overall training, I felt like it was useful.
Yeah. And I think too, one thing that I will say is I feel like it challenges people to step outside of their role at times and figure out how to be versatile.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, there's one year, someone might play second. The next year, that might be the shortstop. And then the next year, they might have brought, they might have brought in a new shortstop. And now, well, also the second baseman's new too. And now you're at third. For sure. And so, or even in the lineup, oh, you're a sophomore, you're a junior. Well, now you're a 3-hole, but you were 8, as a freshman.
Or again, on the same side of that, it's not even that I necessarily got so much better. It's just that on this team they need me to be the 3. They need me to be the 4. Where on another team like that wasn't the scenario. And so it doesn't, now you have to know how to do with like your skills that you currently have, how to hit like that, because they're going to pitch you different based off of obviously where you are in the lineup. And then like having that into that is like, okay, hey, I'm, for example, like I'm going to get more off speed now, or maybe there's times where like coach all of a sudden throws me in the 1-hole, right? And I'm like, okay, well now I'm batting leadoff. Well, again, like, do I need to change massively my, things of what's going on, or do I not, so.
Yeah. No, I think too, I've had a lot of, being a little bit younger than you, I've just had a lot more, I've had a lot more experiences of recently where people are just now kind of talking about their transfer process and their ability to, kind of, what they went through when they were transferring from location to location and school to school, and actually opening up about it in that process. And so I've just heard more about it of recent. And then also too, you just hear a lot about the transfer portal, and you see guys that are more willing to move. And then also too, like, there's this bad rap of transferring, and it's like, well, it looks bad when you move. It's like, well, it could, if you move, if you're 4 years, 4 different places, yeah, sure. But also too, like, transferring isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's not frowned upon in all instances too. And so it's just been something that's been like fresh on my heart, and you see a lot of it with the transfer portal now too. And then guys that don't want to go to JUCO because they have a bad rap on it, but then also too the benefits of it, and then also too though the intricacies of educating. Like JUCO is getting better and more popular now, so it is like the awareness is, they've gained awareness of JUCO is good baseball and
For sure.
certain areas for sure.
Yeah.
There's also bad baseball.
This became a JUCO promotion.
Yeah, right.
podcast
So they
for
probably
sure.
love us, right?
Yeah.
Them and Eric Sim. But
Yeah, I think like you're saying too as well is one of the people always think, we all immediately go to like this like cynical perspective on or critical perspective on people transferring. But like one of the things that people forget is a lot of players are transferring because they aren't good enough. They picked the wrong level or they picked the wrong team and they're like, yo, like I'm not ready for this level or I'm not going to play at this level.
Right.
And those things. And also too, a lot of people don't remember this is that the coach is telling them to transfer. The coach, like for example, when my boy Dion walked in there, he said, get in the portal. I'm bringing my boys.
Yeah.
I got luggage.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and he said, I'm bringing
it's
my
real.
boys in, like get in the transfer portal. So like there's scenarios like that where again, like new coach, new coaching staff, or realization of realizing like, hey, I'm just not going to play here. Right. I need to go somewhere else. A lot of these guys that are in the transfer portal too are not just going to another Division I. Like there's a lot of these other guys that are going to transfer to like a D2 or they're going to transfer, to mid-major and they're at a Power 5 or something like that. Right. Or, all of that stuff. Right. And so that became, just huge from there. It's just like understanding, that piece that we always go and it's like, oh, well, they think they're so good. It's just like, no, a lot of guys are transferring because they know that they're not going to play. Right. And like the guy wants to play. Like, you know what? He didn't move across the country and he's not spending. Sometimes like coaches don't understand this too. Like he's not going to go into, maybe he's not on scholarship and all these things. He's not going to, and he's got to pay for his housing and food and all these other. He doesn't want to spend $15,000 to $20,000 to whatever it is, maybe, $40,000 a year and not play across the country. So maybe he is going to go transfer to some other school that is a mid-major now or whatever. And he's going to drop his cost, dramatically because the school's, isn't as expensive. And also on top of that as well, is going to get to go play and he's going to achieve his goals to go do that. So to be cynical about that and be like, oh, these players, they think it's like, there's a lot more that like goes into like those decisions. And two, at the drop of a hat, a coach will leave. A drop of a hat, a coach would be like, "Oh, Old Miss called. Like I'm out of here." Like that's what happened to my recruiting coordinator, right? It's like again, like our coaches were leaving and going to these bigger schools. Like they can leave at any moment. Like and again, in that scenario, my recruiting coordinator handed me off, and like something got dropped in the process, right? And it affected me, right? So like it goes both ways. When the coach is like, "Oh well, he was going to be our shortstop, so we didn't recruit this," and then so he left. It's like, well, it happens the opposite way too.
Right.
Like you could leave at any moment too. You have a little bit more stability, but at least you know that you're coaching when you get there. Like, okay, I'm going to be the head coach or I'm going to do whatever. That kid is going there and taking a risk. He's going there, moving across the country, sacrificing money, safety by his family being around. He can go home for dinners or do whatever, all these other things and taking all these risks. And he might not play, and not necessarily because he's not trying hard and he's not bought in and he's not one of the culture guys. Like he's just not good enough. And that's okay. And that happens. And also too, maybe also you also are bringing in 3 more shortstops and he was already number 3.
Yeah.
Right. And he's just like, it's just not a good
writing
fit
on the
for
wall.
me, man. I just like, it's just time for me to go. Right. Or it wasn't a good fit. How you like to coach is not a good fit. Just like they might not be a good fit for you, you might not be a good fit for them. Right. You might be very triggering to them. They might not play very well for you. And they could go somewhere else and be a superstar. I've seen that happen. Like, again, like one of my close friends at our junior college, he batted 0, had like 40 at-bats or whatever, like literally batted 0 and struck out like over half of his at-bats, right? Then he went and played in a harder conference, like CSN's conference here locally, and he batted like 3-something or something like that, or upper 2s, right? In that range, right? And it's like in a harder conference would bat. But again, like he just did not mesh very well with our coaching staff and how they responded to things. And also too, like the pressures and, again, I'm sure he did his own growth and all those things too as well. But again, largely it was a coach that was going to like let him play, took the pressure off him. And that was a scenario for him that was better. Right. So, sometimes again, the environment is really important, right? Like there's a reason why, you can't plant certain plants in certain areas,
Yeah.
right? Like Vegas has certain plants for a reason, right? The environment does have an effect.
Yeah, turf.
Yes.
Yeah, AstroTurf.
Yeah, 100%, right? Right. Very important. So it's just like thinking that as well as like, it's got to be, there's that fit in all of those things as well. We probably need to do another podcast on opening this subject a little bit more too on like the mindset side. I know a lot of this was like X's and O's, and then we got into some mindset there at the end. But like I think on the same side of that, we probably need to open it up a little bit more about like, okay, well, if you are going to transfer, the mindset you should be having, right, when you're transferring, and also to what you should expect once you do transfer, and what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. I definitely think asking more questions. The X and O's are really important to kind of know what you're getting yourself into.
For sure.
And two, you're just seeing more and more transferring. It's more common.
Yeah.
It's easier to do now than ever. And so,
Yeah.
Just a topic that, there's a lot of commotion over, and people are, there's a lot of people that love it, hate it, everything in between. So, but yeah, no, the mindset's a whole nother topic, I think, when it comes to moving locations and everything like that. So.
Yeah. And it's a lot of times it's not what you think it's going to be.
Yeah.
Grass is greener, or, we'll open up subjects like too as well of like, maybe you went down on the level. So you got like this, you come in a little naive and you're thinking this, right? I experienced all those things, made a lot of those mistakes. So yeah, maybe we'll open that up on the next one.
For
all
sure.
Right, well, I'll pray us out and we'll get going. Dear Father, thank you so much for just giving us this opportunity, God, just to just express, areas of where we can help others, or where we've fallen short from our experiences. And we're just so thankful that you've opened our eyes and softened our hearts so that we can relate these things and communicate them clearly, or to the best of our ability, God. And we just ask that you continue to work through us, and that you continue to open up the hearts of those that are listening. And we ask all these things in Jesus' mighty name. Amen. Amen. Well, until next time, Farm System out.